Good day. You're listening to the Spiritual Artist Podcast. This is Chris Miller, your host. It is kind of cold outside today, but I'm really excited about the person I'm interviewing today because she is a good friend of mine. I've known her for many years. One of the challenges to doing this podcast is that I try to pick people that are artists, and I pick someone that it might be an artist in one field. Originally, I was thinking a person that is an artist in one field, but Dorayne is talented in many fields. And so I am so excited to bring her on board. She's going to share her experiences and also her different artists' experiences. So Dorayne Breedlove is a storyteller. She's a musician. She's an artist. She's a spiritual mentor and teacher. And I love this. She leads drum circles. And unfortunately, this interview is not about her drum circles, but we might have to bring her back. But she also does sacred circle dances and creates experiences for people to connect within and with others, to feel love, support, reverence, and relatedness. So good day, Dorayne. How are you?
Aloha, Chris. I'm so excited to be here. I am doing so well. It's nice to say that too, that I can say I am doing so well. It
Well,
feels good.
that is wonderful because, I was thinking before we logged in, well, Dorayne, she's so talented in so many areas. And I know that you're also starting to paint, right? Didn't you tell me that you're starting to paint?
I started painting in the spring of 2020
Wow.
when things just completely shut down. I was in Kauai at the time. I moved to Kauai in 2019. And as things unfolded, and I had work as a musician there. My partner and I were co-music directors for a church, and everything shut down. The
Right.
industry of tourism shut down, which I also had a minor gig selling products at a farmer's market and luau's. And it was that fallow time that we'll
Yeah.
probably
Oh,
talk
oh,
about here.
what a good lead,
Fallow
Dorayne.
time.
Because, I was
And
just
I
saying,
had all this art supplies, and I was like, let me pull that out of the box I've had for a year. And I discovered I'm an artist with paints and canvas. I didn't realize that about myself because my mom was an artist, not me. My
uh,
mom. My mom is a trained artist, went to college, got a degree, taught art. And so, in the shadow of my mom, I did not see myself as an artist like that. And when I took all these fun things out of the box and started playing with it in 2020, I reframed that and said, my mom's an artist. I used to say, not me. My mom's an artist, and I'm an artist too. It's in my blood. That's how I claimed it. Isn't that fascinating?
it
We're
is
we're
fascinating. But because we all had to deal with that. When I think about you're doing such, you talk about, bringing people together. That's your core, right? Doing sacred dances, sitting in a circle, being intimate and meditating. How do you do that when you have to keep apart, right? And yet you found another outlet.
it's yeah. So
Yeah.
the mm, that's interesting you say that because when I discovered this part of myself, it was it was solo. It was a solo experience, different than what you just described, where it's group experiences where we connect within and with others in drum circles, in sacred circle dances, in these different kinds of workshops and classes like the artist's way that I have taught. So that was a solo practice of discovering that about myself, which doing a labyrinth
Yeah.
is a solo practice. And I know that that is the topic for today because that going within, that the opportunity to settle, to be open is a solo practice, a solo spiritual practice. And anyway, I just wanted to share that as we are
You're
moving
it
into
is.
the
It's
topic.
So, listeners, what we're going to talk about today is a subject called labyrinths, and it's something that has been close to home to me. But a lot of people aren't even familiar with a labyrinth. I'm going to show a book on the screen, but I'll share the title with the listeners. It's called "Walking a Sacred Path: Rediscovering the Labyrinth as a Spiritual Practice," which is why Dorayne. So I was talking with Dorayne about it. I added a chapter to my book on this because it is what you call a fallow time. It's a time to step back. And when I walk a labyrinth, it's a time when I kind of stop being creative and I start inputting in me. But when I started talking to Dorayne and she shared her excitement and also her experience with not only walking a labyrinth, but I'll let you tell the story, but building labyrinths. So tell us, how did you get involved? When did you first do a labyrinth?
That's a great question. It feels like my like decades. It feels like decades. I don't know when I first experienced it. That's interesting. It's so long ago that I don't even recall when that experience happened. I just know that it's part of who I am now. And I mentioned my partner, his name is Doug. And wherever we go, if it's a town we're visiting and we're there for a little bit of a time, we look for labyrinths. Or even when we're passing through and we know we can have a moment to go to a labyrinth, we look for a labyrinth in that town. So we have been so many places on labyrinths. And when you said not a lot of people know what a labyrinth is, the spiritual practice of labyrinth is like a walking prayer, walking meditation. It is the experience of connection to self and source. And there's in the research I've done, they're not really exactly sure when labyrinths first started appearing. They there they are, so to speak. there is um there is some research that in the like 12th century, 1100s, they started appearing a lot in Europe. And there is one really famous one. It's Chartres, France,
Oh,
and it is the cathedral there. It's still in existence. It was 1100s, 11 early 1200, where they're thinking it was designed and created, and it's still in use. This is considered a pilgrimage oftentimes that people do labyrinths if they can't go necessarily to the Holy Land to do a pilgrimage. And there's a lot of twists and turns. So a labyrinth is circular, there's a way in, there's a center, and there's a way out that's exactly the way in. So you don't get lost. It's not like a maze.
no,
Where a
no.
maze would be you go in and you hit dead ends and you're trying to find your way out, and it's different. It's a spiritual walk that represents life in a lot of ways, because life has a lot of twists and turns. And often we have to stay present, because where's the next step going to take us? Oh, we're going straight. Oh, now we're going to take a turn. And if you go with other people, it's so fascinating because of the design of most labyrinths. You could be on one spot, and then the person right in front of you who is just right there now is clearly on the other end of the labyrinth. It's wild sometimes how labyrinths are designed. And even that is, they're metaphors of the labyrinth that one can take, because everyone's in a different place in their life. So they could be in a different place in the labyrinth. The labyrinth is such a metaphor for life. The twists and turns, the staying present, the ability um, to not project out because you think you're here, but oh no, now you're going over there. So you have to really just stay
Be where you
mindful.
are, right? You have to be right
Yeah,
where you are.
right here, right now. It's so amazing. I just love labyrinth walks. I love everything about it. And so not too long ago, like a couple of weeks ago, my partner and I made a labyrinth. I currently work in we call it a living, let me see, it's called the Pride. The place is called the Pride. It's a private learning association. That's what it's called. The private learning association called the Pride. I'm a mentor, and I mentor 7 to 12-year-olds. We're currently talking about the rainforest. It is project-based learning. And I can create anything and do anything else. So as we were starting this new unit, I said, Doug, come and help us build a labyrinth on this property. It's 7 acres outside of Austin. And so the whole process was amazing. I've walked on so many labyrinths and have gotten so much out of it. To actually build one with children was, it's life altering for me.
Well, when
And
you said that, when you told me, Dorayne, that you were doing that, I was like, if you are familiar with the Labyrinth and you're listening to this podcast, you're going to go, how did she build? They're complicated, right? I mean, they are very complicated patterns. And like you were saying earlier, you're forced to stay on a path, and it winds in and out past people that go off to the other side of the labyrinth. How did you build that? How on earth? I mean, because that's not an easy thing to do.
Wow. Well, I am very blessed to be with a super geek who is a wonderful engineer in mind wise. And so he actually helped to design this. It was brilliant. It was brilliant. We're talking about 11 children plus myself and another mentor for a morning and afternoon time to build this labyrinth. So maybe we had about 3 hours. And he talked a little bit about the history of labyrinths for the kids, what the purpose is, because it is a spiritual practice rather than a game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
To run in as fast as you can and run out as fast as you can. So, they're like, oh, I see. And then he took all of us and very systematically created this labyrinth by simply having a stake in the middle of the labyrinth with a long rope. And along the rope, he had markings that he put with permanent marker. And he pulled this rope. It actually is now 50 feet in diameter. This labyrinth turned out to be 50 feet in diameter. So we're just talking about half of it because we're in the middle.
Right.
And so he pulled the rope, and wherever there was a marking, a child magically would come and put a rock under that marking. Okay, so
we're going to show listeners, if you're watching this on YouTube, we're going to show clips, right? You sent me photos, and we have a video of this process because it's unfathomable. It really is that children and you and Doug could do this. It really is.
Yeah. And so as he moved it along, because he'll go, here we are stretching that rope. There's rocks. They magically appear because in the hill country, there's limestone everywhere. So the rocks would go underneath those markings. They were about 2 feet apart. And then he'd move this rope 1 foot to whatever direction. I think he did it to the right. And there's more, more markings for the next set of rocks. They magically appeared. The kids scrambling around the property. Then he'd move it 1 more foot to the right. And as he did this, it created the circles with the rocks. Does that make sense? Can you?
Yeah, but how did he know where the circle breaks and goes straight in? Or
that's a good question. So he first did all the circles. And then wherever circle was connected, and we knew that was going to be where a break was, he would take some rocks from that, and then he would turn it.
So he had a diagram to look at that he was matching, right?
Yes, he had a diagram in his mind. He didn't actually have it on paper. I never saw it on paper. He had it
in his mind.
Yeah, that actually is pretty impressive.
Amazing. That is amazing.
All I had to do was follow.
So what people do, listeners, is you start walking in at an opening, and it twists you in and out. But ultimately, like you said, you end up in the middle, right? Into like a middle space where you can stand and pause and reflect. And then you have to come back out. You come back out the same exact way that you went in, but
Yes.
backwards, right? It's backwards.
Yes. Yes, it's the same way. So I do have a process of how to walk the labyrinth.
Oh, good.
It's just one way. There are many, many ways. As many individuals as we are, the many different ways one could walk a labyrinth. And so for people who are either experienced walkers or those who are new, this may be either some new information or a different twist on some ways that maybe you might know how to walk. Again, it's just a way, it's a tool. It's not like any right way. There's no right way. You'll When you research labyrinths, you'll hear so many different ways people walk it. And so the way I like to teach it for people when I do teach how to use this as a spiritual tool is that before you walk in, you actually center yourself. So what does that mean for me? I just take deep breaths. I connect myself to the ground, to my environment. There are so many labyrinths. They're sometimes indoors, sometimes they're outdoors, sometimes they're even mobile, as in they are on canvas that are rolled up. And so you can walk on these different labyrinths wherever. So I just center myself to the present, and sometimes I have an intention.
Hmm.
That's another way. Like I have an intention. I'm going into this space to feel peace. Maybe I'm agitated. Maybe I'm working through an issue. So an intention to feel peace. Maybe there's an intention to get information about something. So I usually set an intention and then I release the intention, because then once I start walking, as I'm walking, it's all about connecting to myself, to the space, to spirit within and all around. So that could change. Things start to come that changes that my original intention, because
Oh,
I didn't
is
think
the
about that,
is the
right?
intention usually a question, or is it?
Sometimes it is. It can be. I have a question. I'm. How do I navigate this time in my life, this change in my life? And it could be a job change. So how do I navigate? Is there any information I need? I'm walking in to gather information to get some answers. So I can do something like that. It can be that, or it can just be, I I would like peace. I just would like peace. There's one particular time I was grieving so strongly. I had just released a relationship that was significant to me. And my intention when I walked on this labyrinth was to just be with the sadness and the grief. And so I remember walking this labyrinth and just dropping to my knees in the middle of the labyrinth, crying my eyes out as I was just being with the sadness of having that breakup. So before I go into the labyrinth, yes, typically I will have an intention, but mostly if I don't have an intention, just to be open, I'll just breathe to center myself.
Okay.
So when I go in, I teach the the way forward into the labyrinth before we get to the middle, that whole process of twists and turns, as the first R of three. The
Okay.
first R would be to release. So what am I releasing? I could be releasing my negative judgments. I could be releasing fears. I could be releasing shoulds and shouldn'ts even. It could just be whatever. I'm just releasing. I'm releasing, 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 releasing. Sometimes I'll just say, I might just even say, I release. And for me, wherever there's a turn, or it could be an angled turn, or it could be an actual switchback turn, I pause. I personally pause and I breathe, and then I turn and I'll walk some, breathing, being mindful of my steps. Here comes another turn. I stop, I pause. I might say I release, and I turn. I have had people who actually say what they're releasing. I release my fear of not having enough money.
Mm.
Walk, walk. I release my expectations of what my children should be doing. Walk, 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 things like that. So, a, a, a suggestion to walk in with the first R of release. And the reason why is because when we get to the center, if we have released, what does that mean? We have space, we have an opening, we have a void, so to speak. We have a place to, in the center, receive. The second R, receive. Receive what? Receive impressions, insights, guidance, receive emotions, receive thoughts, receive.
So
That's the center.
do you have a specific time that you stay in the center, or how do you time that? Or do you
Yeah,
just,
I just feel it.
you,
I
you
just
just,
feel it. It's intuitive. Like, it could be long, it could be short. I could even walk around the center, in the center.
well, what I like about the whole concept is when I wrote my book, I was focused mostly on thoughts. Most of my book is on thoughts. And as I started working on the process of a spiritual artist, I realized that a lot of what we deal with is emotion and feeling. And so I love this line: thoughts are of your brain, but emotions and feelings, they're from your body. They're from your body. And so by walking through that labyrinth, you are accessing the feeling state, right? And
Oh,
so
absolutely.
maybe you don't I guess it is about, when you say release, maybe it's releasing my expectation to control, like I will spend
That's it.
five
Thank
minutes in the
you.
middle, right? Yeah.
There you go. That's another thing I forgot. Yeah, releasing control, releasing expectations, releasing, yeah, all of that. That's beautiful. Hmm.
Because you don't know how long you might step in the middle and suddenly boom, intuition speaks to you and you have an idea of an answer, or you might just want to stay there for a while.
Hmm. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So typically, then, as I teach this, the center is where that takes place because you have done your release work. You have released your expectations, fears, judgments, negativity, emotions maybe that you have been feeling, and you're ready to, like, get some answers, or right. And so that would be the center to receive anything that there might be to receive, including, like you said, changes in your emotional body, not just thoughts in your mind that may be helpful. It's everything. It's
Mm.
all those things. All right. So now you have intuited it, you're complete in the center, and you are now returning with reflection. That's another R, right?
And
So
there's a
we're
lot of R's.
returning
Yeah.
with reflection and gratitude, oftentimes, because this has been typically an experience that has benefited you as you are approaching it that way, holding the space of labyrinth, walking in a way that, yes, this is benefiting me. And so there's a return with reflection, gratitude, integration, even. And so as I return, I'm just feeling that. I'm feeling the gratitude. Maybe something came in the center where now I'm like, okay, I'm thinking about this and how it's applying to me now in this new state, because maybe something new came to me, some idea, some way of being, something. So it's just a lot of gratitude. And I find when I return, it's a lot quicker. I go in, it's slow. Then I return, is like lighter. It's like la 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 la. That's just typically for me. Just like, wow, I come out of the labyrinth. That was a lot faster than going in. But it's, what's time, right?
No, well,
So
what is time? Well,
yeah.
when I did I only started doing a labyrinth walk usually during the solstice, and I only started about 4 years ago, and I fell in love with it. And but there were things that challenged me. Okay. One of them is that you have to stay on this little path, right? You can't get off the path. And when you're doing it with a group of people, what happens, listeners, is you line up and there's usually someone leading you into the labyrinth, and they space you out. So if you walk really fast, you will overcome the person in front of you. Or if you go too slow, you'll have people backing up behind you, which is okay, right? I think everything's okay in the labyrinth. But for me, the control freak that I am, I'm like, I can't overcome Susie in front of me, and I can't slow people down, and I can't step off the path. And like you said, the turns happen where they happen, right?
Yeah.
It is a practice in letting go and
Uh-huh.
releasing and listening. And yeah.
What I like what you have to say though is that you're recognizing
Mm,
those thoughts, which is wonderful because then you can work with those thoughts. Here I go again.
yeah.
I'm judging myself. What a perfect place to recognize that so I can like breathe through it and recognize everything's okay. Like you eventually said, everything's okay. I'm okay. I'm making so many things up about the person behind me, about the person in front of me. But really, this is my practice right now. I can trust that the person behind me is taking care of themselves. The person in front of me is taking care of themselves. I can just trust that. And if they need to pass me, they'll find a time that's appropriate for them to pass me. That's not mine. That's theirs. I'm doing mine. I'm doing my work. So it's wonderful because again, you can use the labyrinth to just be with those thoughts and have an opportunity to go,
Mm,
wow, is this something, true for me? And what about it? Is there anything I could change about it? Can I love myself through this, accept myself this way? And if I accept myself this way, wow, isn't that a whole nother level of ah,
release.
beingness? Yeah, release and beingness. Here
Yeah.
I go again. I could be lighthearted. There I go again.
Well, you're so right. It is definitely a metaphor for life, because in life there are, whether we want to believe it or not, we are on a physical realm. We age a certain, we're going to get older. We process, we meet someone, we get married. Often, many of us have children, but there's a process of life that you're taken with. And part of it is in your control, right? And part of it's just going with it, just
Yeah.
releasing, going with it, you
Mm.
know?
I went on a labyrinth yesterday.
How did that go? Because it was cold yesterday. It was cold.
I knowing that I was going to have this talk with you, I wanted to go and have an experience fresh. And so when I went, intending, I had my intentions, I breathe. I just wanted to, I just really basically was what's open here for me? What wants to show up for me? It wasn't even like anything I was asking for, just except for that. What wants to show up for me? And then immediately that book that you showed earlier, the
Mhm.
book of Walking a Sacred Path.
Yeah, and I'm going to share that
Mhm.
again with the listeners. Lauren Artris is an expert in these labyrinths. It's an older book, but it's very good. It's a very good book.
Yes.
Anyway.
And I had flipped through that
Uh-huh.
and just randomly flipped through it. And the chapter that showed up was a chapter about allowing the ego to let go. That was it, allowing the ego to let go. And so, with that in mind, with having allowing the ego to let go, what is there here for me today? Knowing that I was going to have this conversation with you yesterday, knowing I was going to have this conversation with you today, I started walking, and it flipped. You know how I said you go in and you release,
Yeah.
then you receive, and then you return with reflection and integration and gratitude? It flipped. I walked in with reflecting.
Oh, how weird.
It was like I'm reflecting about the ego. So I started to talk to myself about what is this thing, the ego? And it was so beautiful because I was having a conversation with whatever. And this conversation I was having was letting me know the ego in the experience I had, the ego is purposeful. And so often we go, oh, we need to let it go. We need to discard it or change it some way. It was letting me know how valuable the ego is in having this experience that we call life. This experience is a physical experience that we're having is and we have personalities that the ego holds. The ego holds my personality, holds your personality. We're different in that way, right? And so it's holding this personality called Dorayne Breedlove. And and then it said it's here to protect. And I was like, oh, protect, protect, protect what? Protect what? I was like, because I'm having this conversation. It's like, oh, from any danger and or things really it was danger. I'm like, danger? Like what kind of danger? Like I was having this back and forth conversation. And it eventually turned into this conversation like, what if there is no danger?
Mm.
Then what does it the ego what? And the ego is just like, yeah, that would, it's okay, there's no danger. It's like a whole nother level, no danger. Is there another purpose of this ego? Oh, for to prove one's worthiness and value. Really? Like I have to be me like this, Dorayne Breedlove doing this and being this and being this, right? And I have to prove my worthiness, I have to prove my validity in the world. And then I said, well, what if I didn't have to do that? I don't have to prove myself. That I can just just be, nothing to prove. I was like, oh, very good. Like I'm having this beautiful conversation. And the ego's like, and still, yet there is this personality, and this personality looking separate allows life with the capital L, source itself, to have an experience that is individualized.
I'll say that again. Say that again.
Yeah, if I can say it again.
This.
Allows me, this part of me, to have an experience of itself, this life itself, with source itself, that's individualized.
Individual.
Yeah, the ego holds this, or the energy, we call it ego. It's this energy, this part of my existence that allows me to have an experience that is individualized. It's unique. Me different than you over there, you over there, or you over there, or you over there. So it holds that, and we don't have to prove ourselves. We don't have to protect ourselves. We don't have to. We can, we do all the time, but we
Yeah.
don't have to. That was the message I got going into the labyrinth. It's like, what? It was really profound.
So then by the time, what happened in the middle? You already got your
Yeah,
message.
in the middle. So I did something you shared with me,
Okay.
Chris Miller, about the 3 different brains. And I either you've done this podcast or you're going to be doing this podcast.
It's coming up.
Ooh, okay. That's a little tickler. So the brain that's in the mind, the brain, the heart brain, and the gut brain.
Right.
So I sat in the middle asking about what mind, what do you have to say about what we just did in this labyrinth about the ego? And the mind reiterated this idea, this concept of having an individual unique experience different than others, so that life can have that experience uniquely as me, as you. Okay, so that the mind reiterated that mind, brain, intelligence said that. So then I dropped to my heart. What do you have to say about this? And the heart said, yes, that, and know that as you see yourself different than this person and this person and this person, back behind it all back behind it all. What it's all connected to is source, as in oneness. The heart said oneness.
Oh,
So I can see myself different and individualized. And heart said at the same time, seeing yourself individualized, know that all is one back behind it all, having different expressions. And so if you know this, heart said, then you can see yourself in another. Oh, look at me over there having a podcast and who wrote a book called The Spiritual Artist. Look, I'm over there doing that. And I'm over there ice skating. And I'm over there being a mommy. And I'm over there being a CEO of a company. Like I am over there. Look at me over there. Different aspects of the one over there. So that connection, the heart was saying, is there. So love, love, love is what it ended up saying. Just love. Okay.
oh, that's wonderful.
Then
That's wonderful
I
because,
know.
showing that unity. And also, I love the aspect of recognizing yourself in everything.
Yes.
Yeah.
Then I went to my gut intelligence, my gut brain. And the gut brain said, knowing that you are all one, then have fun with it all. And don't be attached to anything. Have
Mm,
fun and release attachment. This is supposed to be fun. This experience is supposed to be fun. This life is supposed to be fun. And when we have to feel like we protect ourselves or prove ourselves, then that's when we go into the the parts of what we might call the negative aspects of what ego does. But
right.
if ego doesn't have to protect and the ego doesn't have to prove, then it can do what it's designed to do, I think. It's just to hold that individual personality for us to have an experience as life itself and source itself uniquely, to have fun, to enjoy, to create,
Oh,
to
I love
create.
it. I love it. I love this. What a wonderful aha moment, right? So you're talking about integrating. I love this word integration. I think it's we're going to hear it more and more. But you're integrating the fact that you're right. We need there are positives to the ego. It's not always bad. And then the heart space is that love, that connectivity to everything, and that intuition is that instinct of just having fun, being in the moment, interacting and playing. All three integrated come together to answer what your question, right? Your question was when you went into the labyrinth about ego and what does this mean, and you see it's part of all these things, right?
Yes, yes. Woo! So I was like so excited about all this. And so again, then when I returned with, how we release, right?
Yeah. Mhm.
When we first go in, the original thing I said, and I flipped it yesterday,
Yeah.
it flipped itself. And so I was returning with the release because I was releasing then because the gut said attachments.
Oh yeah.
The gut said to just enjoy this and release attachments. And so as like the world stage that is taking place that we can always tune into and go, oh, look at that over there. It doesn't seem and feel so good. If this is a play, so to speak, a big old play that we're all part of, then I can just release that attachment that has to be this way or should be that way. I'm releasing my attachment here and I'm releasing my attachment there. I just kept releasing my attachments, and it was so joyful just to go and have fun. I was releasing and releasing and releasing. It was amazing for me. It was amazing for me. And the it was like, okay, so um the attachments, but there was something else that it took place as well. And if it comes to me, I'll share it because it was another like aha for just just being, like you said, integrated and connected and centered. And yeah, I think the piece happened to be, I kind of talked a little bit about it, was that if we are releasing our attachments, we're releasing our attachments to everything.
Mm.
And I feel like sometimes we do what we do because of the fear of death,
Mm.
right? We want to protect ourselves so that we stay alive. So, what if I release my attachment to even that? And so, when I release my attachment to even that, I could, I felt myself lighten up, and I felt like, yes, this is like the best play ever.
I love it. Oh my gosh, you really did get, I will tell the listeners, I always walk away from a labyrinth with a wonderful shift, right? A shift. And wow, you certainly, because processing death is, yes, it's one of the big ones that most people don't ever, a lot of people live their whole lives and they never even think about it. They never let themselves process the fact that someday they won't be here, you know? But that whole train of thought about releasing attachments, being present, playing, interplaying with life, and accepting, even accepting the ego, accepting the parts of the ego that serve us, or accepting the whole ego, you know?
Everything.
Yeah.
Mm.
Oh my gosh, that's just wonderful. I will share that with my listeners, and it's coming up. I'm going to talk about the three brains. There's another book that I'm going to refer to, but the concept that we in the West here, we're so focused on our mind. We're really, the mind base and the thought processes and thinking through. And in a lot of ways, we've given up some of the older traditions, which are based on the heart, which could be considered the body and walking, and the gut. We have a healthy gut. More and more, you're hearing about this with people having problems with digestion and health issues and autoimmune issues, all tie into the gut. So really, though, we're not saying give up the brain. We're not saying give up the heart or the gut. We're saying integrate all three, you know?
Yeah.
And so,
I That's it. I think you are on, and we're on to something really beautiful. And the more we can accept, I think the more then we feel at home. And the more we feel at home is the more we reveal what is true about ourselves, which is love. That's it.
right.
Essentially, that's it. Which just love in physical form.
And it's funny when I think about the book, so many of my chapters deal with different aspects of that, where I ask people, when you walk into the art studio, if you give up the need to control where it goes, you give up the desire to validate yourself. It's not about validating yourself with that art. I'm not a painter because I'm trying to say, look what I can do. I'm a painter because I'm expressing creative force is love. It's just creative force, right?
That I look forward to reading that in here. I read the
So
chapter you had on Labyrinth at the very end, so I just got this book. So
yeah, well, there you go. And that's what it's all about. It's about just being in that space. And so I realized when I was starting to paint years ago that my mind would take over and be criticized. And it was trying to keep me safe, right? Don't
yes,
embarrass yourself.
yeah,
If you put that painting out there, people might laugh. If you show that, they might make fun of you, or maybe you're not good enough. But once you accept, and I do believe that you're good already, just by the fact that we're here,
mm-hmm,
our very existence proves that we are good and
mm-hmm,
worthy, and an expression of spirit, expression of this, what everyone name it, source, God, Jesus, what we are, an expression of that love, right? So
that's beautiful. I'm glad you mentioned that, because that also came to me at the Labyrinth about the proving part. You don't have to prove yourself. Here you are. You're already existing. There's
yeah,
nothing to prove. You are here already. That in and of itself ought to be the only thing you even need to have validity about your existence. You're here.
I mean,
Nothing to prove. So I'm really grateful that you mentioned that, because that is so important for people to hear and to embody as their truth. There's nothing to prove. I love also what you said about being that critical mind that shows up sometimes when you're in front of an art piece. I When I work with the 7 to 12-year-olds, we have been doing more and more art because I am an artist. And so as an artist, I want to share this with the kids. And we were learning things together. And they are looking at their piece of whatever it is that they're working on. And it's not always going to be to their liking. Like, not
Right.
everything we produce is something, or what we're creating is like that you love it or even like it, right? So I'm realistic about that with them. And I say, okay, if there's something you don't like about whatever it is you just did, what can you do to change it in some way that maybe it is more to your liking? Like, I'll ask that question to them. They're like, I don't like this line I did about this. This doesn't even look like a leopard. I'm like, okay, what can you do to make it be more of your liking? And I said, you see this eraser? It's your best friend. It's your best friend. Use it, you know? And so it's like, what could they do? So they're empowering themselves to change it. That critical nature is there. So what can we do either to work with it? Because they're not always going to like it. The other thing is sometimes you really, really don't like it and there's nothing you can do. So you can always go,
Right.
and
But that's
start
that's
again.
that's the thing. There's no, I remember my art mentor, she said, paint over it. You just start again. Because there is no mistake. There is no mistake. What I like to focus on is when you look at creativity as when you're successful, it's when you manage to be in that place that you just talked about, that place of play, love, experience. I measure my creative experience, the longer I can stay there, it doesn't matter what's at the end. It doesn't matter if the painting is unsellable or the wrong color or people won't use it in today's interior, whatever. All those things don't matter. What matters is I'm in that place. I can stretch that place of just being creative. And so with those children, you just say, well, you don't like it? Keep painting, paint over it, flip it, turn it upside down, turn it into an abstract, right? There is no wrong. There's no wrong in the creative process. I love that quote.
No wrong in the creative process.
There's no wrong because you're
Mhm,
creating and you're in that place of
mhm.
experiencing God, experiencing itself, right? Yeah.
Yes, beautiful. I love
So,
that. Thank you.
so I want to share with the listeners that we have a website where you can go and research, right, and find a labyrinth near you. I encourage you to do it. I encourage you to also, if you really like the idea, to look up this book because it does explain the history of it and everything. But I also am going to post a flyer on the website with sharing Dorayne's tips, understanding, of course, that there is no wrong to walking a labyrinth, right?
Right.
You could flip it. You could flip your R's. You could just it's like life. You go on that path, you stay on that path, it's gonna take you somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes, you might just go on it and things come up, emotions come up, opportunities just to be with whatever. Maybe there's an affirmation that you say the whole time in and the whole time in the middle and the whole time out.
You're right. That's another way people do it,
Mhm.
right? They can set an intention. You can ask a question. You can make an affirmation. Just make it a practice of an affirmation. And I love to focus on putting my foot down, putting my foot down, putting my foot down, right? And that's all I focus on, following those little lines, you
That's
know?
wonderful. Yeah, so that where you can find a labyrinth wherever you might be or near where you might be
Uh,
is labyrinthlocator.com. It's labyrinthlocator.com, and then it gives you like a field to put in where you are, or maybe you might even like a city, or it might even be a zip code, but it's really easy to use. Just when you go on that, you can just say, hey, where's a labyrinth near me?
well, that's amazing. It's an amazing thing for the listeners. But I was surprised. I didn't realize that you and Doug had done so many of these labyrinths. It's such a passion for me. I find it to be a very spiritual cleansing period for me. Is there anything that I didn't discuss that you'd like to share with the listeners, or did we cover?
Wow, we covered so many things.
I
I
know.
just so appreciate the opportunity to share. Also, one of my passions is
Yeah.
labyrinth walking, and to either one introduce this to anybody out there who's listening, what how wonderful that is, like, oh, labyrinthlocator.com, where can one be? And or also with those who are seasoned labyrinth walkers, just to say thank you for being part of a community that does this kind of work. Because for me, I guess I will conclude with this: whenever we do, my belief system, whenever we do something that is healing in nature for ourselves, because there is, in my belief system, a oneness to our experience, that it affects everyone. So any individual work I do in my own healing is somehow collectively experienced.
Oh,
And so I just leave with that.
I love
And I
that.
thank everyone and anyone who does any kind of work where they are
It's like a,
working with
what,
that part of themselves
yeah,
or
I call it a spiritual practice. There's so
yeah.
many different ways that we have spiritual practices. It's in the title of this book, but it's something I really believe about. You're right. It affects the whole. If we just change that one little person, you know, or just
Yes.
that consciousness. So
Yes.
wonderful. Well, I love having you on the show, and we will have to have you back because I know you do so much with drum circles, and that's a whole nother meditative exploration, right? It's a whole nother subject.
Yes. Whole nother one.
Oh, another
This
one.
one,
Well,
this one is beautiful too because it is the body, working with the body and the body's way to
yeah.
move in
I
space.
love that. So, listeners, don't forget to like this podcast. If you're listening to it on YouTube, follow the podcast so you get updates when we have new ones. And like Dorayne mentioned, I'm coming out with an exercise that's going to follow up on that, the three brains, and how we can use those when we're asking questions of ourselves, how we can use the intelligence of our brain, the intelligence of our heart, and the intelligence of our gut, and why we should be aware of all three of those intelligences to get us more spiritually connected. So anyway, Dorayne, thanks again for being on the show.
You're so welcome. And thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed this conversation with you. I love you so much.
I love you too. Thank you.
Aloha, my friend.
All right.